Slides drama lang tayo today, so give me a second. Occupational hazard. Ay, dapat you should mute this. Hindi mag-echo. Yeah. All right. How many of you know the word knolling? It has not anything to do with Mary Knoll, no? If you're old enough to remember Mary Knoll. Anyone have a guess? You can Google it. So knolling is a technique in commercial photography of arranging items in 90-degree angles and then taking a photo. They use it in advertising, and it's very popular in Instagram. It was popular as way back as the late 80s, no? If you're into. So this is not an actual photograph. This was generated using AI, as many of you probably have done, no? I put the keyword analytics knolling, and then yan lumabas. You gotta wonder why, no? Here's another frame. So I was trying to figure out, how does AI actually interpret a prompt? So yan, analytics knolling, and I used a tool called Midjourney to create it. I was trying to look at it closely. Actually, if you look at it closely, let's go back. It seems like these are tools of, I don't know, archaeologists, maybe, paleontologists, and then this latter two frames, if I look closely, it's either mga chemists, basta some scientific instruments. So to the mind of the AI, analytics is that. Gives you some reason to pause for a moment, right? I ran another prompt. I don't know if you can guess what this prompt is. It's a very striking image of a woman, and, you know, they call this prompt double exposure. Woman plus blank, double exposure. Can you guess what the blank was? Here's another one. Ganda, no? Could be an album cover. So the prompt was women plus Terminator, double exposure. So I wanted to start with that because I couldn't think of a better way to, in a way, perk everyone's attention. In the case of knolling, this is actually a term that existed long before AI became popular. But now, through artificial intelligence, many of you are learning about AI and knolling at the same time. That's one perspective. And then in the case of the woman Terminator, Terminator is obviously something familiar to most of us who watch movies. It's also, in a way, the Hollywood version of AI, which is both the cause of a lot of fear, but at the same time, for me, I think it's the cause of a lot of hope. Why do I say that? AI is nothing new, but maybe one thing that has changed in the last 6 months is AI is suddenly everywhere. It's mainstream. Now the question is, what does that mean for us? So my opening talk today will be about medyo mabigat, no? The future of analytics and its impact on society. Confession, someone else was supposed to do this, but they had to bring me in as plan B. Hopefully I don't disappoint. It's a daunting topic because how can I presume to be able to tell you the future of AI? I mean, it's anyone's guess. So what I will instead try to do for the next 20 or so minutes at least is give you a view of how AI is being talked about today. And then more importantly, the latter half of my talk will be, what are people really afraid of, no, when it comes to AI? It seems like compared to prior technology trends, with a few exceptions, like, for example, when people talked about blockchain, metaverse, even data science, once upon a time was a big deal. It seemed like all of the conferences were very positive. But do you find it odd that when AI finally took the stage, everyone is so negative about it? For me, that's actually a good thing, because once upon a time, everyone was negative about the internet, and now it's second nature to everyone to be on the internet. I think it's good that we are approaching AI from not necessarily a fear-based perspective, but more of a pragmatic perspective. And hopefully that's what you get from this opening. Okay, so how is AI discussed today? I want to generalize parang 3 levels on how AI is talked about. The bottom level, we'll call that foundation. Sometimes you hear terms like foundation models. That's actually the majority of the noise. So the ratio of the levels in my diagram mimic the noise. No? Everyone's talking about the models. To a lesser extent, second level, people talk about applications. In fact, I was just talking to the Canadian Chamber a week ago, and yesterday at the FOI, everyone is so amazed with the number of applications coming out. They're calling it the Cambrian explosion of apps. So we'll talk about that. And oddly enough, there's actually a third level, which people don't talk about too much. The role of the users, everyone here. I think the priority should be the other way around. We should talk about users first. It's design thinking. You have to empathize with people. The foundation models, while they are important, I just have to confess, there's really very little we can do at this moment to affect it. Most of the discussion on how these models are done are over across the Pacific Ocean in California. But that doesn't mean we ignore the foundation discussion. In fact, one thing that I would like this group to figure out, because I don't have the answer, is there a uniquely Philippine perspective to these foundation models that we can offer? Because we certainly don't have a shortage of talent, maybe a little bit of a shortage of investment, but I don't think it's impossible. I think with the people just in this room alone, and not to mention the, ilan na ba? 581 people on the Zoom, certainly there could be ideas. So that's how I will tackle it, and then let's see how we go. So first things first, newsflash. Machine learning is not AI. Do you agree? Parang 50-50, no? There's actually a problem now with the way AI is communicated. All of these terms are being jumbled together. Machine learning, data science, analytics, for that matter. When we had an internal debate, not really a debate, more of a discussion in the board of AAP, and when we made the decision to adopt AI into our name, we didn't have the word AI there before. There was also a question, do we now drop analytics? And the resounding, well, the decision to adopt AI was a bit split, but the decision to keep analytics 100%, we have to keep it there. Unfortunately, it's not as popular as AI today, but hopefully after this talk, you will realize analytics is and has always been the most important thing when it comes to discussing data, even with the emergence of AI. In fact, they are kind of siblings, AI and analytics. So first things first, medyo dry, a little bit of definitions, so people, at least for the benefit of this talk. Number one, AI work actually predated machine learning. Once upon a time, in the 50s, this is following the work of Alan Turing and his disciples, the prominent practice in AI was symbolic AI. And in a nutshell, the idea there was, we can create artificial intelligence if we accumulate so much knowledge and so many rules, I mean for the engineers, if-then statements and decision trees, if you do enough of that, you can create intelligence. It hasn't worked out as much as people hoped. And then sort of sometime in the 70s, another school emerged. This is the work of Jeff Hinton and his disciples. And his idea was, we don't need to really encode knowledge or rules. We just need to gather enough data and then use algorithms to process it. And then one day, AI will emerge. But for the longest time, people didn't believe Jeff Hinton. They thought he was mad. Number one, the practice of data gathering wasn't mature. It didn't become mature until probably the late 90s. And algorithms were really hopelessly in the realm of academia, which prevented people from accessing it. But now, because of, guess what? GPUs, graphics processing units, machine learning is now the norm. And it probably will continue to be the norm. It was just a matter of technology. So that's one of the first points I want to convey today. When we talk about AI, it shouldn't just be a discussion on math, programming, software. There's really real hardware that needs to be developed to make these systems work. And I'll just, based on my perspective, the role of the hardware people has not been emphasized enough. It would have been nice to hear from chip makers, for example, on how they are engineering these systems. That's why actually I'm glad Dr. La Chica is here representing that sector. We cannot ignore hardware. Okay, you hear the word generative, no, and discriminative. Without getting too complex about it, discriminative was the AI we were used to up until last year. It's the AI which, if you give the AI a picture of a cat, it will tell you that's a cat. Or a picture of a person pretending to be a cat, the AI will tell you, no, that's not a cat. So it's basically AI that gets input and gives you some sort of an outcome or a regression forecast or a classification. That's what everyone doing AI up until recently was used to. Now, because of the emergence of ChatGPT and Midjourney, the tables have turned around. Actually, many of the algorithms are the same, but the use of it has changed. The generative AI approach is, I'll give you a picture of a cat, and then you give me more versions of a cat. Or even more popular, I'll give you the word cat, and you give me a picture of a cat. So it's AI that generates more data. So it's a subtle shift in perspective. And this is what's exciting and also disturbing a lot of people. Because we're not used to an AI producing data. We're only used to AI receiving data. We're not used to AI drawing pictures. We're only used to AI classifying photos. And that's why we're kind of in this weird space for the past 6 months, coming to grips with a machine that can do what we do, but better. This is the driest slide of all, I promise. No. So machine learning naman, before we move on. So for those who have been taking Project Sparta, a couple of other courses, you will know that there's supervised learning, there's unsupervised learning, and there's reinforcement learning. I'll just jump to the punchline. So supervised learning is, you already know what you're looking for, and you give that to the algorithm. Look for more things like this. Unsupervised learning is, I don't know what I'm looking for, and you tell me what's in that data set. So for the longest time, those are the two most popular types of machine learning. And AI uses all of these approaches. But I want to draw attention to that that third column, no? Reinforcement learning. What's reinforcement learning? Reinforcement learning is you give an algorithm or an agent a goal, and you put that agent in an environment, and the agent will try to solve for that goal. So that's what created software like AlphaGo, which beat the humans in Go. An early version of this beat Kasparov in chess. And most popular reinforcement learning algorithms now are doing everything from drug discovery to traffic control systems. And oddly enough, this is the AI that people are actually afraid of. They're not afraid of your regression line, or they're not afraid of clustering. They're afraid that if we give a wrong instruction to a machine, like an instruction to an AI controlling a hospital, for example, minimize the number of cancer cases we have. And the AI might just say, okay, I will just kill all the cancer patients. In a very simplified way, that's the problem that people are afraid of. It's not actually AI we're using today. It's AI that will be developed in the future. So more and more, as you get into AI, look into reinforcement learning, because it's also a very powerful tool. So we're done with the preliminary. So this is the big question. There's going to be a panel tomorrow online on the ethics and regulation of AI. But I think we should start making distinctions, because when we say we need to regulate AI, what AI are you really looking to regulate? You want to regulate Waze? That's an AI. It helped me get to Cubao from Pasig. Sayang naman if we don't have Waze. It will regulate your YouTube recommended videos. That's an AI. It will regulate your Lazada and Shopee item recommendations. Those are all AI. Let's be very specific that, I guess for me, the concern really is the generative AI. Of course, everyone can disagree. Maybe there's also something wrong with the older AI, perhaps. But this is really what's caused all of the fuss. And we have to understand why that's the case. Okay, so one thing that I also want to call out, it's early days. I think OpenAI maybe made the mistake of equating ChatGPT with a search engine. It's actually not a good way of treating these models. Because without getting to too many technicalities, ChatGPT is not a database. It does not retrieve data from someplace. It builds data, generative nga, di ba? Based on the patterns it knows. And that means it can give you a statistically probable sentence, but it could be wrong. In fact, one incident involved one of our guests tomorrow, si Dr. Tehanki. He was in an event like this. I don't know if you know this story already. I posted this on LinkedIn. And he had such a long CV, which is, I guess, occupational hazard if you're such a distinguished academic and professor like Dr. Tehanki, no? And the organizers, maybe innocently, trying to be clever, they said, give us a short profile of Dr. Ben Tehanki. And ChatGPT manufactured a completely fake Dr. Tehanki. And that was broadcasted to more than 1,000 people in Cebu. Suddenly, he has a PhD from Oxford, he has a master's from Wharton, he's a member of the World Bank. All statistically probable. Actually, when we tried it again, he was suddenly a basketball player. This is a problem with these generative systems. They're not trained on producing factual data. They're just trained on what looks correct, optically correct. And it's not the best use of this model anyway, no? I was flashing this pala. If you guys want to check out, there's a website called There's an AI for That. It's an AI that gives you recommendations of AI to use. So if you're confused, what kind of AI do I need for dating and relationships? There's an AI for that. I think as of now, there's about 5,000 pa lang, no, na AI apps. But this was just in the last 5 months. Can you imagine where we will be in another 5 to 10 months? There's an AI for that. So this is one of the first assertions. This is not an official AAP stance yet. No? This is just my stance. Why is analytics still important? And I found this framework works very well. It actually traces its roots to decision-making models. Anytime you have a task, you can evaluate it using 2 criteria. One, how certain is the outcome? If the outcome is uncertain or the outcome is certain. The second is how complex is the decision? Complex meaning how many pieces of data do you need to make that decision? So obviously the low complexity and low uncertainty tasks, perfect for automation. An example of this, pushing a button on an elevator. You find it odd that we actually have people doing that for us? I think that's a waste of a human. Of course, it's a good job, it can pay, but this is not what humans should be doing. You should give that to machines. Basic automation. If the task is uncertain, you don't know what the outcome, but the complexity is relatively low, give that to AI, to humans rather. Humans should be gut instinct, experience, that's where what they bring to the table. So this left-hand side of the equation makes some sense. If it's a simple, straightforward task, give it to a machine. If it's a more uncertain task, give it to a human. This is how we've traditionally looked at the difference between AI and humans. But it's this high complexity column, I think, that throws everyone off. If it's a highly complex task, but the outcome is still certain, then you use analytics, meaning it's the human in front, and you have whatever, models, data visualization, Tableau, SAS at the back. An example, credit scoring for banking. It's a complex data set, but the outcome is certain, either approve or decline, or how much do you lend. Perfect. Most of the tasks in business fall in that bucket. That's why analytics will never go away. Which leaves us with the blank space, the highly complex and uncertain tasks, which are still being done by humans, by the way. My contention is this is the best place for generative AI. And I'll give you an example. Have you heard of AlphaFold? It's related to AlphaGo. It was created by DeepMind. But using reinforcement learning, they solved protein folding using AlphaFold. What's protein folding? In a nutshell, it's like drug discovery. You discover new combinations of chemicals and proteins. And if a human were to do that, even with the best analytics, it would take years. When they gave it to AlphaFold, it was solved in 2 to 3 months. These are the uncharted territory where humans don't know the answer, but there's a ton of big data to analyze. That's where AI should be. I don't know if people will agree with me here, But that's my contention. We now need to decide the proper role for these tools. Exploration of unknown territory. That's really the best place. Once upon a time, I think this was Christmas of 2021. I think my board members will remember this. There was a member of AAP who asked, do people really need to know math and stat and programming to use machine learning? And at that time, this was 2 years ago, most of us were like, that's a ridiculous question. Of course you have to know. But today, you don't really need to know math and programming to prompt an AI. But you still have people writing programs for it. So this is going to be my second provocation. And this is in a way biting my lip, because this is going to fly against the work I've been doing for 10 years, building basically the labor force for the left-hand side. We've been building the builders of AI. But now, a new type of role will emerge, the user of AI. And I think AI will be at the level of the automobile. If you're a driver of a car, even if you're a Formula One, you can drift and all that, doesn't mean you can replace a spark plug. And if you're a mechanic, you know how transmission works, radiators, timing, doesn't mean you can drive. And curious enough, we license drivers of cars, but not necessarily mechanics. Strange. Why is that? Because a mechanic can only fix a car. If you're a driver, you can actually kill people if you're not careful. And that tracks to the conversation on regulation and permits. No? We don't know if we're going to go there. So for the vast majority of us probably in this room, we're probably on the left-hand side. No? We know how to use Python, R. We've taken a couple of degrees, maybe boot camps. But actually, the main audience for AI might not even be you. It will be people outside the room who will be using AI for day-to-day. The same way we use Waze without needing to know nearest, shortest path algorithm in graph networks. You don't need to know, be a rocket scientist to use Waze, diba? You just go from point A to point B. So think about it, if that makes sense. Okay, regulation. I want to preface this by saying, no two countries actually agree on how to regulate AI. So that implies, why does the Philippines know how to regulate AI? Or do we? Like on the left, within 2 days of each other, if you look closely, Japan said AI will not be subject to copyright law. And in the same breath, within the same week, the EU put out its AI regulatory, it's not even a regulation yet, it's a suggestion for regulation. Each member country will now need to put up its own regulatory perspective. My opinion is, the EU is naturally the first place to do it because it's a group of countries. In other words, if regulation will slow down one EU country, it will slow everyone down. So no one will get disadvantaged. The problem with the Philippines and everyone else is if we are the first country to regulate AI, we might be the first country to lose out on the innovation race. That's a good perspective to also tackle in the regulatory panel. I don't know if you can see this. So after the EU put out its AI Act, someone did an analysis. If we look at all of the major AI providers, the foundation guys, OpenAI, Stability, Anthropic, how many of them would actually pass the AI Act? The answer is 0. None of them got perfect scores. At best, they're 50%. So the conclusion is, these guys wouldn't be able to do their business if the EU made these rules proper. Think about that. And are they now ready to lose all of the innovation brought by these companies? Are we ready to do that? So I'm on the last half of this, hopefully. I think the honeymoon period is over. We've had 6 months of playing around with ChatGPT and Midjourney. We now need to make some serious decisions. It's actually a utopia or dystopia decision. The good news is, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. We decide where we want to err on the side of. And I've identified, so far so good, I've been interacting with a lot of people online. Some of you might have seen my posts. There's at least 9 issues that we need to think about. And not all of them have a partner. In other words, I think 7 issues have both a utopia and a dystopia. And there are 2 issues which, far as I can tell, is only a dystopia. These issues are not equally probable. In other words, and they're not mutually exclusive. They can probably all go together in one go. But it's good to reflect upon this if we are to think about the future of AI in the Philippines. First, let's talk about jobs. The utopia is AI will generate jobs. And the dystopia is AI will eliminate jobs. Actually, if you look at the history of any technology, there will always be jobs that will be at risk. But so far, so good. All technological innovations have created more jobs than destroyed. But we only see the jobs that are at risk. It's hard to foresee what new jobs are there. But that's our job, to be the industry board. AAP and DICT and TESDA, we need to work together. What are the new jobs that could be created? Let's talk about education. Everyone is worried that students will cheat school using ChatGPT. Guess what? They already are. Let's just take that as a given. The question is, how should ChatGPT be used to enhance the school experience? I was conducting a workshop at a major university about a week ago, and guess what? Professors and teachers are saddled with so much admin work that they can hardly keep up with the teaching load, and worse, they can hardly keep up with the research load. We need these people to research. So if you think of schools as having 2 jobs, knowledge production and labor production, both are at risk today. But AI could help. How do we do that? Remember, these models were trained on knowledge, more knowledge than you will ever be able to study in your life. But we're not using them to enhance our knowledge production capability. Okay, the creative question. On the one hand, unrestrained creativity. Like me, I'm not an artist, but I was able to generate a gnawing image and a Terminator image just by writing a sentence. But then on the other side, our creatives are at risk because their intellectual property is now being sold for nothing. And that's now invaded the realm of music. It's not just art. It's not just graphics. It's also music. It's also literature. So is there a right approach that we can use to preserve the rights of our creators, but then open the door for new creators to come in? Because I will have to argue that AI art is actually, yes, it's still art. The question is how you generate art. And food for thought, back in the 1900s, photography was not considered art. If you read up, it was banned from being considered art for at least 100 years. And the argument was a machine that interprets light or accepts light is not equivalent to a painter with a brush. Ganon ka-snotty yung mga art circles nun. Ngayon, they include photography na rin. But they're just as snotty about art as ever. This one is a bit more complex. The utopia is we democratize the development of models. But the reality is these models cost a lot of money to develop, a lot of infrastructure. So by default, it's monopolized by Silicon Valley. Right now, that seems to be the default position. Is there a way we can work together in the Philippines or with ASEAN or other international groups to expand that capability? To my knowledge, the CEO of OpenAI is traveling around the world right now, arguing for regulation. What they're doing is arguing for monopolies. But that shouldn't stop us from innovating ourselves. We have the talent. We have the AI programs being developed. See, Doc Rex is on top of this in UP. There should be more AI programs. The main question is, who will make the investment in the infrastructure to empower it? So we're close to the end of the balanced issues. Convenience or digital divide? I think this is a bit more medyo woke issue, but in the same way we are so blessed in the NCR lalo to have all of these digital tools. The moment you cross the boundary from NCR to Region 4A and beyond, internet connectivity drops, and guess what? AI use will drop as well. So instead of being more inclusive, we've actually reinforced the dominance of NCR by implementing AI. But should that be the case? It doesn't take a lot to teach how AI is being done. I know a guy who's teaching it in Bacolod right now. I don't know if he's here or is watching from Zoom. You just give anyone access to ChatGPT and they can do it. But they do need internet connectivity though. and they do need a method of gathering the knowledge, put it in the cloud. So let's argue for inclusivity rather than the digital divide. This is another complex one. You can actually use AI to enforce privacy. It's not by default just an invasion of privacy. You can use AI to anonymize customer records, medical records. In fact, the models being used to develop generative AI started out in encryption, and that's how they should be used. But right now, the concern is how AI is invading privacy. And the dystopia there is the more AI is used, the more biases will be reinforced, the more surveillance will be reinforced. So we have a decision to make. Do we use AI to protect us, or do we use AI to attack? And it is the most abstract one. That's why I didn't use the actual picture of Terminator, more of a caricature. This is the big, noisy bugbear at the back of the room, AI safety. But the counterpart of this is, if we're able to make AI systems safe, the productivity benefits are more than 10x. But we're too busy worrying about Terminator. I'm not saying Terminator won't happen. But when are we going to have a mature conversation about automation? Automation is not a new topic. AI-driven automation, even better. So we're done with 7 issues. I want to conclude with 2 issues, which so far I haven't found utopia for. One issue is disinformation. I can't find an alternative. Right now, there aren't enough tools that can detect fake news. AI fails in that respect. But you can use AI to create fake news. In fact, it has been done. So this is a problem that we need to address. And lastly, the climate question. People don't think about climate too much. But these GPUs suck a lot of power. They're also being used in crypto mining. If you add up all of the power consumption of Ethereum and Bitcoin, it's bigger than Iceland. And now we're going to add to that problem by using GPUs to develop AI. I don't see an alternative at the moment. Maybe a better chip. So that's where the hardware people need to come together and figure it out. I want to close with this slide. This is a 2022 State of Tech Talent Report. And I found it very striking because there are 2 axes. The vertical is how much talent do we have as a percentage of our population? And the x-axis is how much of our GDP comprises venture capital investment. And guess who's at the lower left-hand corner of that chart? Talagang, wow, that was so striking. In other words, we are the last place the world will look to for tech talent, and we are probably the last place VCs will look to for tech investment compared to the utopia of Singapore and Israel. But this is 2022, and this is before generative AI came out. So I'm challenging everyone here to prove to me that our position on that chart is wrong. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Right, thank you very much, Sir Doc. We learned a lot. Ngayon ko lang na ito yung knowing, alam ko lang necking eh. Alright, so now let's time to hear from our audience. We welcome any questions or comments for our first keynote speaker. For those of us who are here in the plenary session, you can raise your hand and we will provide you a mic for us to...
All right, we have a question here. Actually, this is one of our students from RevCon, di ba?
Okay. And for those of you in Zoom, kindly just raise your hand and then we'll...
Good afternoon, Sir Dominic.
Hi, good morning pala.
Good morning. I'm really curious. I'm Armelin po. I'm actually following you on LinkedIn, so it's really nice to see you here.
Sa TikTok?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok. Sorry, guys. I'm on TikTok. I have to do it.
I'm really curious, as you mentioned, the inclusivity, then digital divide. So since we know that these developments are really vast in terms of that we have people like in the communities that kind of left behind. So what are the solutions that you think for to make it more inclusive so that we can, reach out to more people to understand how, to use it responsibly. So I'm really curious for that, sir.
Yeah, I'll just rattle off some ideas that I'm actually personally working on. The number one, I think, barrier is really the lack of connectivity. But good news, you can get connectivity through satellite internet. It's just not cheap. But how easy would it be to get people to donate that or to volunteer that so we can have learning camps set up in... I've actually done a lot of work in, for example, in Cotabato, in Barm, and we've gone to places like, Tawi-Tawi in Basilan. They just need internet connection. The moment you give it to them, they'll pretty much figure it out on their own. And that brings commerce, income, online banking. So it's really a big challenge. Well, fortunately, we have the ICT on our side, I think, and that's going to be a pathway to increase connectivity. I know that that's on their roadmap. But even ahead of the government mothership, you want to donate a SpaceX dish, and let's bring it to the far-flung areas of Mindanao or even upwards of Luzon, then let's do it. And then the rest can be supplied by TESDA, AAP, the ICT. Kasi imagine mo, if they had satellite internet today, they'd be on this conference. They'd be watching us. Right now, they're just not there. So I think that's the number one. Number two, more of, I guess, the localization. Let's not ignore that we're a country of 7,000 plus islands and about as many dialects. So there needs to be effort in translating a lot of this language to reach everyone. I don't think it's a big deal the moment you give connectivity, because there will be people, oddly enough, based in the NCR, who are willing to go back home if they can make a living translating learning programs for them. So the learning part, connectivity part is the first. I think the rest will follow. If you can build a workforce that's equipped with the right information, the right skills, then private sector will invest. And let's face it, the wages are still relatively lower outside NCR, but it's good enough for the living conditions there. So I've seen this happen personally in Iloilo when they opened up their, basically their island to BPOs. Suddenly BPOs all over the place. It's improved communication skills there as well. And now they have a thriving metropolis sa Iloilo. But we have to start with the basics. They need to get online.
All right, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, we have another one over here, table 16 also. Thank you, Carlos.
Sige. This is Crisella. Actually, she's my schoolmate back then.
Good morning. I'm Crisella Raceles. I'm a research assistant and student at De La Salle University, Manila. So you mentioned earlier that automation and replacement of jobs due to the emergence of new AI will always be something that happens. And I agree. I think that's inevitable because we use technology to do the jobs that we think we could have automated so that we can use our talents, our minds, our energy for things that are more worth it, things that AI is not capable of. But it's something that will scare a lot of people. A lot of students, a lot of working professionals are scared of the fact that what if in a few years from now I won't have my job anymore because AI would be already capable of doing it. So what can you suggest to those people who have those kind of concerns? What kind of skills should we be forming? What kind of knowledge should we be building so that we ourselves can be resilient to the employment challenges that will potentially be caused by new AI tools?
Yeah, I would like to suggest two thoughts, two anecdotes. This is actually another set of slides na hindi ko na sinama kanina. So one favorite story I like to talk about is the manure crisis. It's a favorite topic of mine. That was the height of horses as transport. Literally, you could not walk in any street without stepping on horse manure. And there was no solution to it until someone suggested, let's just get rid of the horse and figure out how to make the carriage move on its own. Very AI-like argument, if you think about it. Now, that anecdote pretty much spelled the end of the line for people who were experts with horses. It didn't matter how good you were with a horse, you were useless in an automobile. So in that anecdote, the challenge is, are you in denial or are you willing to reskill and upskill? There's also a second argument. This is more recently. In the 80s, when technical calculators started to come out, math curricula wanted to ban it because they said calculators will destroy mathematics. And what happened was, instead, mathematics curricula and accounting and all these numerical functions adopted the calculator as part of their tool. So I think the vast majority of the jobs will fall in this latter bucket. Instead of outright replacement, it will become humans augmented by technology. In other words, when the calculator came out, accountants didn't lose their jobs. They just became accountants with calculators. And then when Excel came in, accountants didn't lose their job. I'm an accounting background kasi. So I hated those columnar pads, no? But I loved Excel. It was just replaced by accountants who knew Excel. So I think it's this binary thinking that we need to let go of. It's not AI versus machines. It's about how AI can work, or rather, not AI versus humans, but how AI can work with humans. But we have to be mindful of the horse and the car situation. There will be situations where there will be so much of a fundamental shift in technology that it eliminates anything that was previously related to that old technology. And we've seen it happen with pagers, for example. Anyone related to the paging industry? Gone. What did they do? They moved to cell phones. But I still remember, I won't ko kung Donald Dim's not here, no? He's the expert in this. People were actually saying, why would I type a message on SMS when I can easily call up a pager? Ganun sila ka backward, no? And then now it's fait accompli, you know. We're used to sending messages freely online, no? So think of it that way. There will always be these occasional leaps in technology. And the only thing stopping you from surviving is your mindset. Are you willing to accept the change rather than deny it?
Okay, so we have maybe our last question. This is from Zoom. Mr. Hudson George Tumadag asks, you mentioned that the Philippines lags in innovation investment. What steps do you think the country should take to increase investment in this area?
Wow.
Si Sir paringit na lang mamaya. Baka pwede phone in question.
Well, okay. Less controversial. So I've worked with the UST and Pishired a lot. Let's just use that as our straw man. Their biggest challenge. We did a Family Feud game in that event. I don't know if some of you were there. One of the questions: what is one of the biggest hurdles in getting grant from Pishired? And do you know the number one reason? People don't know how to write proposals. No joke. It's a paperwork problem. And that's why just understanding how grants are done, investment is done, can go a long way. But here's the question. Where do you go to learn that? Who's teaching that? I think there are occasional workshops you can find. But maybe that's a place for, AEP, the ICT TESTA to start. You might have an idea with you, but you don't have the right process. Then that starts the ball rolling, no? And it's very basic things like what is your methodology, what is your risk management, what is your outcomes. Pretty much a project management document, which many people are used to doing in corporate. Hindi nangyayari in investment side. That's number one. Number two, I think we just have to have a better investment culture. I'll give you a basic, this is a personal experience. So I was in a discussion with several investors to launch a tech company, an AI company. This was before generative AI pa nga. So there would be me and then 4 investors, okay? And they would be putting up the money and I'll be the industrial equity partner. And my role would be to create the technology, use my brand, hire the people, develop the solutions, market it, and basically earn the revenue. And they'd be providing the money. And you know what they said? Let's make it equal sharing amongst all of us so it's fair. And then I said, wait, you want to start a company that's dependent on me for the people, me for the technology, me for the sales, my brand, and you want to give me just 20%, 1 out of 5? They said, well, we're the ones taking the risk. We're the ones putting up the money. And in my head, I was very polite, but in my head I was saying, if money is the only problem, I don't really need you. There are other people who could give money. In fact, if you go to any VC, they'll be lucky to get 10 to 20% of a company. The majority of that should go to you as a founder, you as an innovator. We don't have that climate here in the Philippines. I'll just take one for the team and say it out loud. We need to change that perspective. It's not just about funding. It's about having a good idea. And if you have a good idea, guess what? You're not going to own your idea. It's going to go to the funders. Be brave enough to assert your rights. And good news is, if you can't find it here, Singapore is right next door. You can get it probably there. In fact, I know of a number of founders who have found it there. Problema, that goes to the GDP of Singapore. Doesn't go to the GDP of the Philippines. So I think those are the top things we need to figure out. Understand the investment process, learn how to apply for grants, and then change the investment culture in the Philippines.
Okay, I think we can address one more question and then we can move on to the next part of our
Makakalikasang umaga sa ating lahat. Good morning to all. I'm Aisel Condino. I'm from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. I'm administrative assistant / analyst and student also. I'm a mom, a single mom too. My question is related to the environment. What step can you take to ensure that the advancement of analytics and AI positively impacts the environment and addresses the challenges posed by climate change?
That's a very complex question. By the way, I think we should give one more question to the Canadian Chamber after this. My view on this, and that's why I had the question mark in my last slide, is it's something that's not second nature to AI people or tech people. We don't care about the waste we generate. We don't care about the power we use, because most of us are probably not spending for it. We use our employers' resources, or we use the free ones. I can't give you a concrete step other than we need to establish some rules and climate consciousness about this. We need to make AI research sustainable. And at the same time, certainly climate and disaster resilience is one area where AI can really make a difference. But I think we need to plant the inception in everyone that when you buy a GPU, you're actually creating carbon footprint for yourself. And even if you use AWS or these vendors, guess what? They also use massive server farms to help you. Where is all of that carbon going? And then you balance it. I think it's something that can't be done in isolation. We need to work together on it. I don't know if in DENR there's a position on how to use AI and these hardware responsibly. If not, then maybe we can help you draft one and think about it. One more question, Julian.
Thank you. Julian Payne is my name. You touched upon the issue of equal internet connection across the country. I think there's another issue. One of the concerns of business has been internet speed. My question is internet speed a constraint on the use of AI? Because if it is, then countries like Singapore or Israel are going to have a tremendous competitive advantage over the Philippines and some other countries. So question, to what extent is the internet speed across the country a major constraint on the future development of AI in the Philippines? Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to argue from a user standpoint, to get started in, let's say, running an AI model. Let's say you wanted to download GPT-3 or one of the earlier models. That's a huge file to download. But let's say you get over that. You can't go without fast internet connection, because every time you need to access an API, it has to update itself. I don't know what's the threshold. Like, I can't say, do you need like 20 Mbps to 200 Mbps? My question would probably be, why are we still debating these 2-digit and single-digit speeds when every other country seems to have figured out triple-digit speeds? Again, there's probably a lot of nuance to it. Maybe we need the telcos to elaborate on how that can work. But yeah, the short answer is speed is a big factor in enabling AI. I'll add this one. So training models is one thing. Using models is another. And for example, if you wanted to implement, let's say in the near future, we wanted to go to self-driving cars, you won't be able to do it without these cars actively communicating to a network. So 5G is very important, for example. If we can't get that rolled out, then don't bother, with these edge devices. But that's the opportunity. Imagine if there's free-flowing 5G everywhere. I think in some spots we do. Then it enables a lot of things, not just digital robots, but actual physical robots. Don't need to wire them up anymore. They can connect to a network. At the same time, we have to be mindful that anything you wire up to a network will be vulnerable to attack. And I will be the first to tell you our cybersecurity posture, generally speaking, is not very good in the Philippines. We're actually the practice ground for hackers in Indonesia, in Israel. And this is not me talking. This is actually a report by, I think, Kaspersky or one of these cyber vendors, that the Philippines is, I think, number 3 or number 2 in terms of cyber attacks, because we're just so easy to attack. So there's those two issues, I think, that are correlated with each other.
Hi, can I also add to the solutions, to the possible solutions? So we as an association, that's why we have to work and ally ourselves among other industries, industry associations, government, public sector, so not just with the DICT. So particularly the recently launched movement called Go Digital Pilipinas. Have you heard of it? So it was just a movement launched during the Philippine Development Plan launch as well in January 30. So I'm not sure if the executive director is here. Armani Alcayaga, Donald Lim also earlier was here as part of the board. So Go Digital Pilipinas is organized particularly to address the digitalization programs across the country. How can we put together or help the LGUs put together a plan around digitalization when it's not one size fits all. So, for example, there are far-flung areas that they still don't have internet. Their digitalization programs would look very differently than the ones in Pasig City, for example. So it has to be a very customized approach, and we can only solve that, or at least attempt to solve that, when we work directly with the leaders of the LGUs. And Go Digital Pilipinas is actually kicked off in La Union. I think that was 3 weeks ago. And it's going to be like pit stops for each of the LGU stop that we're going to be doing. Analytics Association of the Philippines is part of this organization because there will be some who are already ready for analytics and AI. And we will be part of, we actually started already training, giving training on basics of AI in La Union when we did the kickoff, right? While La Union, there is a thriving startup community there if you haven't been or you haven't heard. Perfect, for the techies these days who'd like to be working in front of, the beach and not really feeling the stress of corporate life in an office, right? So that's the feels, right? But that's very different to the other LGUs that need also to connect to the internet and then really reap the benefits of digitalization. I mentioned also, if I may acknowledge the presence of the President of NICP, National ICT Confederation of the Philippines, Ms. Joy Abueg. And very much related to what they do, the ICT councils with the different LGUs, so that's also the intent. So it's like an extension of what the ICT is doing in IBPAP. So it takes a village. And we're glad that we are part of the village people. Right, thank you.
All right, I think that